One head, two tails, yang yang. Two heads, one tail. Yang yin. Two tails, one head. Yang yang. Two tails, one head, yang yang. tails, one head, yang yang. Three heads, old yang. Start out with some little tales. Tales of inner meaning from Vitality, Energy, Spirit. A Taoist sourcebook, this comprehensive anthology traces the teaching on the three treasures, vitality, energy, and spirit through the long history of Taoism, along with brief selections from the classic texts of Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu. This book presents a rich selection of tales and sayings from Taoist literature, as well as a broad range of writings from the Complete Reality School. Introduction. Fables, stories, and jokes have been used by practical philosophers for thousands of years as a means of conveying ideas and impressions to the receptive mind. They are particularly useful for subtleties that do not translate well into formal logic, and for making a direct impression, bypassing intellectual prejudices in the mind of the reader. Several examples of such tales of inner meaning are presented in this section of the present anthology. The first group of stories is drawn from the Li Tzu, a well-known classic and source of numerous popular tales whose currency has long since expanded beyond the realm of Taoism per se. There is a wide range of opinion about the date of this text, a question to which there would appear to be no satisfactory solution in conventional historical terms. For the purposes of the present translations, the extent of the significance of this matter is that there appear to be additions and comments that flatten some of the tales and tend to diffuse rather than clarify their inner Taoist meaning. Therefore, the stories from Li Tzu are rendered here in forms reflecting a synthesis of the written text and oral tradition. A number of the tales of Li Tzu are pithy and amusing. The first one presented here, the story of Confucius and the two boys, the learned man, illustrates the limitations of discursive reason, thus hinting indirectly at a more comprehensive mode of consciousness. Presented as a joke at the expense of Confucius, it illustrates how logic can be coherent within the bounds of its postulates, yet be ineffective or inaccurate in a larger context. While this is well understood today in the context of physics, it is not generally applied to the whole realm of cognitive knowledge as it is in practical Taoism. The next story presented here, the story of old Mr. Shang, capped by the remarks of Confucius, illustrates the metaphysical basis of the extraordinary powers attributed to concentration, the idea that subjective and objective worlds are relative and respond to each other as they change and evolve through their mutual interaction. The Poor Man and the Gold deals with the negative aspect of concentration. The joke about a man who stole the gold reinforces the observation that too much concentration on one thing can cause a person to overlook something else of equal or greater importance. and that focus on only one aspect of a situation can blind a person to other significant features of the total reality. This story can also be taken to show how concentration on transcendental matters at the expense of common sense leads to loss in both worlds. Who for Whom also revolves around the theme of one-sided concentration and biased awareness. In this case, the prejudice in question, what is now termed anthropocentrism, has to do with the relativity of importance and point of view. Like Christianity and communism, Confucianism is essentially an anthropocentric way of thought. The Taoist Li Tzu ridicules the Confucian attitude in this story, where a youth at a banquet of self-satisfied feasters makes a bold attack on human conceit, showing how assumptions about the order of nature reflect subjective biases and lose their presumed validity when examined in the larger perspective of the universe. This perception is central to ancient Taoist teachings on ecology, which antedate Western concern on the subject by thousands of years. The tale of the missing axe, Suspicion, presents another view of the workings of subjectivity, one that also readily beckons insight into matters near at hand today. Ups and Downs on the Aged Laborer and His Employer illustrates mechanisms of compensation and balance whose beginnings spring from a vantage point beyond one-sided views. The last two tales from the Li Tzu presented here illustrate the technique of mental fasting and the distinction between timeless and temporal aspects of consciousness. Tales of Inner Meaning, the Learned Man. One day, Confucius was walking along with some disciples when they came upon two boys arguing. Confucius asked the boys what the dispute was about. They told him they're arguing about whether the sun was nearer at dawn and farther away at noon, or farther away at dawn and nearer at noon. One of the boys argued that the sun appeared larger at dawn and smaller at noon, so it must be closer at dawn and farther away at noon. The other boy argued that it was cool at dawn and hot at noon, so the sun must be farther away at dawn and closer at noon. Confucius was at a loss to determine which one was correct. The boys jeered at him. "Who said you were so smart?" The story of old Mr. Shang. Old Mr. Shang was a poor peasant whose strange fate began to unfold on the day his ramshackle little house was commandeered by a couple of arrogant young men belonging to the establishment of a local gangster. At that time, wealthy families with many followers and hangers-on could be as if a law unto themselves. Some families might have thousands of armed men on their estates. Men. The gangster in question was the head of one such clan, and his followers were all young bullies from local well-to-do families. They spent their time dressing up in costly attire and gallivanting around doing as they pleased. The boss of the clan was well known for being able to make a poor man rich or a rich man poor with a single word or a nod of the head. Even the government had him on the payroll, though he had no regard whatsoever for law and order and contributed nothing at all to the general well-being. Countless were the deluded young men who had been maimed or killed in senseless duels staged to fire the ambitions of yet other deluded young men and to amuse the gangster and his gang. Old Mr. Shang thought he had discovered his chance to become a success when he overheard the two young men that had taken over his house talking about their leader. The very next day, old Shang set out for the residence of the gangster, who was such a big man that even the government paid him not to secede from the empire. When old Shang arrived, he was greeted with hoots and hollers of laughter and derision. Who was this bumpkin, come to join their gang? Clearly he was going to be no fun for a duel, so the boys decided to see how it looked when an old man hit the ground after a fall from a building 7 stories high. A number of young men took poor old Shang up this high tower and told him the boss was offering 100 pieces of gold to anyone who would jump off. Several of them made for the railing as if to be the ones to get the prize, so old Shang hurriedly jumped over. The hooligans held their breaths for a moment as they prepared to see the old man plummet to a gruesome death. What met their eyes instead was the sight of old Shang drifting lightly to the earth like a feather in the air. Unable to believe what they had seen, the young men dismissed it as a fluke due to perhaps the sudden gust of wind that everyone had noticed. Next, they decided to take him to the river bend, where there was an infamous rapids full of holes with unmeasured depths. They told him of an enormous pearl lying at the bottom of a deep hole under the swift current, and said the boss had offered it to anyone who could fish it out. Old Shang plunged into the current without a moment's hesitation, only to surface moments later holding a huge pearl in his hand. This could no longer be passed off as a fluke. The old Shang was now given a place among the guests of the master of the house. Not long after that, a fire broke out in the storehouse. The boss told his followers that he would reward anyone who could retrieve his silk. Old Shang rushed right into the burning building and emerged unscorched with the silk. At this point, the hooligans were convinced that Old Shang must be one of those who had attained the Tao, and they all begged forgiveness for having tricked him. They said, "We played tricks on you, not realizing you were one of those imbued with the Tao. We derided you, unaware you were a man of the spirit. You must think us ignorant, deaf, and blind indeed, but we wish to ask about your way." Old Shang said, "You mean you were joking?" When this was reported to Confucius, he said, "Someone who is perfectly sincere can affect things thereby." Old Shang believed in falsehoods, and things did not betray his trust. How much the more effective would truth and sincerity on both sides be? Make a note of this. The poor man and the gold. A poor man decided one day to get rich, so he put on his hat and coat and went to town. As he walked through the center of town, pondering the question of how to obtain riches, his glance happened to fall on someone carrying a quantity of gold. The poor man rushed up and grabbed some of the gold. He was caught as he tried to flee. The magistrate asked the poor man, "How did you expect to get away with the gold, with all these people around?" "I only saw the gold," explained the poor man. "I didn't see the people." Who for whom? Once a man held a huge banquet with 1,000 guests. When someone presented a gift of fish and fowl, the host said appreciatively, "Heaven is generous to the people indeed, planting cereals and creating fish and fowl for our use." The huge crowd of guests echoed this sentiment. A youth about 12 years old, however, who had been sitting in the most remote corner of the banquet hall, now came forward and said to the host, "It is not as you say, sir. All beings in the universe are living creatures on a par with us. No species is higher or lower in rank than another. It's just that they control each other by differences in their intelligence and power. They eat each other, but that does not mean they were produced for each other. People take what they can eat and eat it, but does that mean that heaven produced that for people? If so, then since mosquitoes bite skin and tigers and wolves eat flesh, does that not mean that heaven made humans for the mosquitoes and created flesh for tigers and wolves?" Suspicion. Once a man found that his axe was missing and suspected his neighbor's son of taking it. Observing the youth walking around, the man was convinced that his was the walk of a thief. The youth looked like a thief and talked like a thief. Everything he did pointed to his having stolen the axe. Then one day the man happened to find his missing axe. After that, he noticed his neighbor's son wasn't behaving like a thief anymore. Ups and downs. Mr. Yin of the state of Chao was a prosperous businessman. His employees worked without rest from early morning until late at night. Among them was an old laborer whose physical strength was virtually exhausted, yet who worked all the harder for that. By day he did his work huffing and puffing, grunting and groaning. By night he slept soundly, thoroughly exhausted. As the old worker slept, his spirit relaxed and expanded. Every night he dreamed he was a king, a leader of the people, commanding the affairs of the nation, roaming at leisure and reveling in villas, enjoying whatever he wanted, his delight beyond compare. When he woke up, he would go back to work. When someone expressed pity at how hard the old man toiled, he responded, "People may live 100 years, but that is divided half and half into day and night. In the daytime, I work like a slave, and I can't deny that it is miserable. At night, however, I am a king, and my pleasure is incomparable. So what have I got to complain about?" As for the boss, Mr. Yin, his mind was occupied with his business. His thoughts concentrated on his affairs, so his body and mind were both tired. At night, he also collapsed with fatigue into a deep sleep. Every night he dreamed he was a servant, rushing around all the time, doing one chore after another, being scolded and beaten time and again. So he used to huff and puff and grunt and groan the whole night through. Mr. Yin was unhappy about this state of affairs and consulted a friend about it. His friend said, "You have a status and wealth far beyond that of most people, but at night you say you dream you are a servant? Well, the alternation of suffering and ease is normal. If you want to have it good both in working life and dream life, I'm afraid that is asking too much." After that, Mr. Yin lightened his worker's load and reduced his own concerns, so both got a bit of relief. Forgetfulness. A man named Hao Tzu suffered from forgetfulness when he reached middle age. He would forget by nighttime that he had gotten drunk the day, and he would forget by morning, he would forget by nighttime what he had gotten during the day, and he would forget by morning what he had given at night. On the road, he would forget to walk. At home, he would forget to sit down. At any given time, he was unconscious of what had gone before, and later he would not know what was going on at the present. His whole family was distressed by his condition. They called on a fortune teller to figure it out, but there was no prognosis. They called on a shaman to pray for him, but that did not stop it. They called on a doctor to treat him, but that did not cure it. Now there was a Confucian who reckoned he could heal the man, and his wife and children offered him half of their estate for the remedy. The Confucian said, "This cannot be figured out by omens, cannot be alleviated by prayer, cannot be treated by medicine. I will try to transform his mind and change his thought in hopes that he will get better." Now when the Confucian tested him by exposing him to the elements, the man asked for clothing. When he starved him, the man asked for food. When he shut him up in the dark, the man asked for light. The Confucian joyfully announced to the children, "This sickness can be cured. My remedy, however, is secret and not to be revealed to others. Please clear everyone out and leave me alone with him for 7 days." The family did as he said, so no one knew what measures the Confucian took, but one day the ailment from which the man had suffered for years was all gone. When the man woke up, he flew into a rage. He threw his wife out of the house, punished his children, and went after the Confucian with a hatchet. The local people grabbed him and asked him what it was all about. He said, "In my past forgetfulness, I was clear and free, unaware even of the existence or non-existence of heaven and earth. Now that I am suddenly conscious, all these decades of gains and losses, sorrows and joys, likes and dislikes, suddenly occur to me in a welter of confusion. I am afraid that future gains and losses, sorrows and joys, likes and dislikes will disturb my mind like this. Will I ever have a moment's forgetfulness again?" The ailment. Lung Shu said to the physician Wenqi, "Your art is subtle. I have an ailment. Can you cure it?" The physician said, "I will do as you say, but first tell me about your symptoms." Lung Shu said, "I am not honored when the whole village praises me, nor am I ashamed when the whole country criticizes me. Gain does not make me happy. Loss does not grieve me. I look upon life as like death and see wealth as like poverty. I view people as like pigs and see myself as like others. At home, I am as though at an inn, and I look upon my native village as like a foreign country. With these afflictions, rewards cannot encourage me, punishments cannot threaten me. I cannot be changed by flourishing or decline, gain or loss. I cannot be moved by sorrow or happiness. Thus I cannot serve the government, associate with friends, run my household, or control my servants. What sickness is this? Is there any way to cure it? The physician had Lung Shu stand with his back to the light while he looked into his chest. After a while he said, "Aha, I see your heart. It is empty. You are nearly a sage. 6 of the apertures in your heart are open, 1 of them is closed. This may be why you think the wisdom of a sage is an ailment. It cannot be stopped by my shallow art." Our bottom trigram of our primary hexagram is read as solid, broken, solid. This is the trigram Li, fire or light, or fire and light. Li is fire and light, both inner and outer. As an inner light, she is consciousness at its most lucid and unclouded, holding things together in the mind, perceiving their differences and connections, and discerning the underlying patterns of relationship. And as well as vision, Li is the light that makes things visible, the power to cast light on things, spreading clarity and awareness of order. Li is the middle daughter, living in the south, the region of midsummer and the burning sun. Our top or outer trigram of our primary hexagram will be read as solid, 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 or whole, whole, whole. That is Kyon, heaven. Kyon is suprahuman cosmic law. Enduring, he determines the nature and development of all things, from the movement of the stars to the cycle of the seasons, to causing each individual seed to grow into its own kind of plant. Heaven is creativity in its pure form, the force that drives change and what endures within it. He confronts us with truth in what it demands, both as the absolute law of nature and as the challenge of individual calling, experienced as an inner law. He is both the awareness of what to do and how to be, and also the power to act on it. Heaven is Father, found in the northwest, the realm between autumn and winter, when the buds set and the seeds fall to earth. So, Kyon, heaven, above Li, fire and light, gives us the primary hexagram of 13. Once our 6th line transforms from an old yang to a young yin, that will give us a top or outer trigram of solid, solid, broken, or whole, whole, open. Also, oh no, yeah, we got to read. There we are. Dewy, lake or marsh. Dewy is lake and marsh, abundant energy that teems with life. She is the impulse to communicate, share, and exchange, and delights in both inner and outer conversation. She brings things into circulation and gives them voice. This is the sheer enjoyment of participating in life to the full, expressing ourselves and hearing others and satisfying our desires. Lake is the youngest daughter, spirit of the fertile west and of autumn. So dewy, lake or marsh above Kyon, heaven. Oh, nope. Kyon, it was Li, fire and light. Dewy, lake or marsh above Li, fire and light is hexagram 49. if we want to understand how the answer to our question works from the I-Ching, or when we consult the oracle, the question having the general context of how can I act in creative relation to the spirits or forces shaping this moment? If we want to understand the answer to that, we need to understand how the parts of our reading work together. The key to understanding a reading is to know your way around its main components, how they fit together, and the different roles they play. If your reading includes changing lines, then you will need to understand primary hexagram, relating hexagram, and changing lines together. The two hexagrams in conversation with one another map out your whole answer. The primary hexagram shows you quite directly what your answer involves. The relating hexagram generally describes what the answer is about for you. It sets the primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. If the two hexagrams map out a landscape for you, then the changing lines stick a pin in that map to say you are here, or at least here's some places you may find yourself. They are the immediate answer to your question. As the most specific focused part of a reading, their message always takes precedence over all other elements. For example, the primary hexagram might describe a reassuringly secure situation, but a changing line could warn how insecure your position is within it. We will start by reading from the Taoist I-Ching, which is written in 1796 by a Taoist adept named I-Ming, and Thomas Cleary has translated it for us. It is highly spiritual and highly alchemical in nature. We will move on from there to a more dictionary-like synthesis of several different commentaries on our hexagrams, which has been edited and put together by James Dekorne, who's a practitioner of the Tao himself, and gives several editor's notes, which are lucid and profound often, and mixes in some quotes from other sources like the Kabbalah and things like that. So things get interesting at that stage as well. Then we will move on to Hilary Barrett, who takes all of this and makes it very simple. It's almost like a beginner's commentary on the I-Ching, I would say. And yet she has really, really profound questions to ask to apply this to our lives. And she brings things together in short little parables almost, and makes it, brings the point home really well. So our primary hexagram, 13, in the beginning of the Taoist I-Ching by I-Ming, there are short little definitions of each hexagram. 13 is sameness with people, mixing in with the ordinary world, concealing illumination, assimilating to others. And 49 has the succinct definition, of revolution, refining personal desires to become unselfish. We will turn first to the text section, which contains our changing lines, which are our most focused part of the reading. But then we will move on to the commentary section, which doesn't have changing lines in it. So we'll need to note that when we get there, that we're moving on past the most focused point to more of the surrounding details. Sameness with people, our primary hexagram 13. Sameness with people in the wilderness is developmental. It is beneficial to cross great rivers. It is beneficial for a superior person to be upright. Explanation. Sameness with people means other people and oneself are as one. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is heaven, strong, and below is fire, luminous. Employing strength with illumination, making illumination effective by strength, being truthful within and adept without, developing oneself and others as well, it is therefore called sameness with people. This hexagram represents mixing in with the ordinary world, concealing one's illumination, skillfully assimilating to others. It follows on the previous hexagram, tranquility. In tranquility, yin and yang match each other, strength and receptivity are united. When practitioners of Tao reach the point where yin and yang are balanced, strength and receptivity are unified, and the spiritual embryo is formed. Then they can merge with the ordinary world, hiding their illumination to cultivate advanced practice. But to mix with the ordinary world, concealing one's own light, requires great impartiality and impersonality. This is a matter of being selfless. If there is no self, there are no others. When there is no self or others, the sense of others and self leaves. When the sense of others and self leaves, then others are oneself, and oneself is identified with others. This is like the skies covering everything, like the suns shining everywhere. One can thus return others and self to emptiness, being like others in the wilderness, as it were, this assimilation being unfailingly developmental. In wilderness, the wilderness is a vastness where there are no people. Being like people as though in a wilderness means there is no image of self, no image of others, no image of people. If one cannot be the same as other people with a true heart and can only be the same as them in favorable circumstances but not in adversity, only in times of ease but not in danger, then this sameness is not true and sure and is ultimately not developmental. When the text says it is beneficial to cross great rivers, it means that if one can go along with situations of danger and difficulty, then where there is no danger or difficulty, wherever one goes, it will be beneficial. Every ordinary person in the world assimilates to others, but most people do so for personal reasons and do not do it correctly. They assimilate to those they should be the same as, but they also assimilate to those whom they shouldn't be like. This is not the meaning of sameness with people in the wilderness. Therefore, the benefit of crossing great rivers is beneficial insofar as one is upright like a superior person. The superior person assimilates based on correctness, not on sentiment. What is correct is only a matter of what is right and true. Sentiment changes while truth has no change. If one assimilates based on truth, then there is no sentiment. When there is no sentiment, the ideas of others and self both are transformed. Only truth is to be preserved. Inwardly, one can thereby develop oneself, and outwardly develop others. Seeing afar means seeing afar by means of illumination, acting directly by means of strength, strength and illumination both working, firmness and flexibility balancing each other, inwardly not losing oneself, outwardly not hurting others, round and bright, clean and bare, one stands in the midst of myriad things without being inhibited by myriad things. One is within yin and yang without being constrained by yin and yang. Our supporting hexagram, 49 revolution, will put our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence the direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. If I can turn there. Hexagram 49 revolution. In revolution, the sun of the self is truth. This is creative, developmental, fruitful, and perfect. Regret vanishes. Explanation. Revolution means riddance. The reason for riddance is obsolescence. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is lake, joyous, and below is fire, luminous. And joy is based on illumination, while illumination controls joy. In joy, there should be no delusion. In illumination, there should be no obscurity. Producing joy from within illumination, having illumination within joy, therefore it is called revolution. In the image of the hexagram, lake is metal, associated with the west. Fire is the fire associated with the south. Refining metal by fire, when metal meets fire, it produces brightness and is melted down. When fire meets metal, it goes into storage and returns to the root. This too is the meaning of revolution. This hexagram represents refining yin energy. It follows on the previous hexagram, exhaustion. In exhaustion, joy is produced from the midst of danger. This is how to take the true yang in water to get out of danger. However, even if you can take the true yang in water, if you cannot restore the true yin in fire, the gold elixir will not crystallize and you will not attain joy. So this path of producing joy from within illumination is indispensable. Producing joy from within illumination is the working of refining yin energy. Refining yin energy means refining one's own personal desires to become unselfish. Humans are the most conscious of beings, born with the true energy of the patterns of yin and yang, of heaven and earth. When they are first born, they unconsciously follow the laws of the Lord. Completely good, with no evil, the true essence is bright and clear, the open awareness unobscured. Emotions do not stick in their hearts. Wealth and poverty do not disturb their minds. Wild beasts cannot harm them. Weapons cannot get at them. When hungry, they simply eat. When cold, they just put on clothes. Without thought or reflection, their capacity is originally clear. Then when people reach the age of 16, yang culminates, producing yin. As they deal with things based on acquired conditioning, they develop characteristic temperaments and intellectual knowledge. At this point, only sages of superior wisdom granted by nature, when they are not opposing nature in the primal state, and when they serve nature in the temporal state, are able to preserve primal reality and not be damaged by acquired conditioning. Among mediocre and lesser people, rare are they who are not ruled and manipulated by acquired conditioning. After this, 100 anxieties confuse their minds, myriad affairs belabor their bodies, they take the artificial to be real, abandon the true and enter the false. As the days and years go by, they become estranged by habit from what is close by nature, and the quality of clarity is damaged. The new piles up and becomes old. The pure becomes defiled. This is where the pollution of obsolescence and defilement comes from. If we look into the source of the pollution of obsolescence, stagnation, and defilement, we see it all comes from having a self. Once one has a self, an ego, the mind of Tao is obscured and the human mentality arises. Conscious of what one should not be conscious of, enjoying what one should not enjoy, one goes to any lengths following personal desires. So revolution simply means overthrowing the ignorance of the self to restore illumination. But if one wants to overthrow the ignorance of the self, it is necessary that the self first be understood. Once the self is understood, one can be sincere in revolution, and the ignorance of the self can be overthrown. Therefore, in the path of revolution, the sun of the self is truth. The sun is an image of illumination, understanding. Truth means sincerity. If one does not understand, one cannot be sincere. If one can understand, one will be sincere. With understanding and sincerity, as the first thought is truthful, one will be able to overthrow and revolutionize the self. Therefore, revolution contains a path of creativity and development. However, though revolution is creative and developmental, it is necessary that revolution be correct. If right and wrong are not differentiated and true and false are not distinguished, but all are overthrown together, and one enters into nihilistic quietism, this is not correct, and so is not fruitful. And not being fruitful, it is not creative or developmental. Only by correct revolution, conquering the ego and returning to propriety, getting rid of falsehood and maintaining truthfulness, burning away all the pollution of conditioning and bringing to light the true essence of the primal unified awareness, reaching this state, returning to the fundamental, integrating with natural principle, pure and clean without flaw, can the regret of having a self vanish. This path is not hard to know. What is hard is to carry it out. It is simply a matter of people being able to be sincere in revolution. Now we will read our changing line 6 from our primary hexagram, Sameness with People. This is our most focused part of the reading. It takes precedence over all other elements. It puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. Changing line 6 has the general context of beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. Whoa. Changing line 6 from hexagram 13, Sameness with People. Or changing, I said changing line 6. Being the same as people in the countryside, there is no regret. Explanation. When strength is used with flexibility, one can be in the world yet out of it at the same time. Though outwardly the same, inwardly one is not the same. This is likened to sameness with people in the countryside. Sameness in the countryside is having great knowledge yet appearing ignorant, having great skill yet appearing inept. Circumstances cannot move one. One does not cause regret and does not have any regret oneself. This is sameness that is harmonization without being influenced. So in the path of sameness with people, it is necessary to be able to adapt to changes, to assess the time and determine what is to be done. It is important that assimilation be correct. If assimilation is correct, being strong and lucid, one can assimilate wherever one goes, without any forced assimilation anywhere. Then the meaning of sameness with people in the wilderness is realized. Now we will get on to the commentary section. I think I-Ming shines in these sections especially. And our primary hexagram 13, sameness with people. Heaven above, fire below. Heaven with fire, sameness with others. Thus do superior people distinguish things in terms of categories and groups. Sameness with others means being the same as other people. Above is heaven, below is fire. Fire is the sun. The sky covers everything. The sun shines on everything. The sky and the sun are in the same place, impartial and illuminating. This is the image of sameness with others. What superior people see in this is that when practitioners of the Tao deal with people, it is important to be able to be the same as others, yet it is most important not to assimilate to them arbitrarily. So they distinguish them in terms of categories and groups. Categories and groups are internally similar and united, like different classes of people, each having their own groups. Superior people see each group as a category in which all members are the same. Distinguishing means differentiating. Things are things that are right or wrong, good or bad. Superior people must distinguish things. They dare not arbitrarily consider all categories and groups the same. This is how they model themselves on the impartiality of heaven and distinguish things in emulation of the illumination of the sun. When one is impartial and also lucidly aware, there is no one in the world one cannot be the same as, and there is nothing in the world that is arbitrarily considered the same as something different. This is because superior people assimilate by means of the Tao, not in terms of mentality. They assimilate by means of reason, not in terms of personality. This is what is called harmonizing without being influenced, associating without becoming a partisan. This is how the sky and sun are the same toward things, and this is how superior people are the same with others. (49) and the commentary section. Revolution. In the back, he calls change. Lake above, fire below. There is fire in a lake, changing. Thus do superior people make a calendar and clarify the seasons. Change is transformation. Above is lake, below is fire. There is fire in a lake. A lake is wet, fire is hot. If there is too much moisture, fire will dry it up. If there is too much heat, moisture will dampen it down. When moisture and fire are in the same place, the wetness and heat balance each other. This is the image of change. What superior people see in this is that as people establish their careers in the world, when they cannot achieve proper adjustment based on actualities and cannot adapt to the times, it is because they do not understand the principle of change of the celestial Tao and the seasons of advance and withdrawal of yin and yang. Therefore, superior people divide the various seasons of spring, summer, autumn, and winter with their 24 energies and 72 periods, and thus make a calendar to show that the operation of the energies of the 5 elements each has its own time to enable people to obey heaven and accord with the time, changing any element that is excessive so that it returns to correct balance. Heaven has its times of operation. People have times when they should act. As the time changes, the way changes. So the way of change is the way of going along with the time. When one acts appropriately in concert with the time, action and inaction, preservation and elimination will not lose their proper balance. This too is one kind of celestial practice. We will now turn to James Dekorne, who's a practitioner of the Tao himself and has compiled several different commentaries on the I-Ching. And he will give at various times editor's notes that are nice and juicy, as it were. Hexagram 13, rather than sameness with people, he calls union of forces. Other titles might be fellowship with men, the symbol of companionship, lovers, beloved friends, like-minded persons, concording people, gathering men, sameness with people, universal brotherhood, fellowship, community, united, human association, union of men, integration of forces, minor synthesis, cliques, concordance, to be in accord with, confirmation, judgment, leg. Union of forces appears in the remote districts of the country, indicating progress and success. It will be advantageous to cross the great stream. It will be advantageous to maintain the firm correctness of the superior person. Blowfold, lovers, friends, in the open, success. It is advantageous to cross the great river or sea, to make any kind of journey. The superior man will benefit if he does not slacken his righteous persistence. Ritsuma/Karcher, concording people, tending towards the countryside, growing, harvesting, wading the great river. Harvesting, Junsu, or chief son or superior person, trial. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of sharing a goal with others. It emphasizes that finding ways to cooperate with and harmonize people's efforts is the adequate way to handle it. The image, leg. The images of heaven and fire form union of forces. The superior man, in accordance with this, distinguishes things according to their kinds and classes. Blowfold. This hexagram symbolizes heaven, the sun, and fire, representing a pair of lovers. The superior man treats everything in a manner proper to its kind, proper to his kind. An analogy based on the component trigrams between the sun and fire, which to some extent are of a kind. Commentary, Confucius/Leg. In union of forces, the magnetic line has the central place of influence and responds to her correlate line in the upper trigram of strength. The hexagram takes its name from the upper trigram of strength, lending its power to the lower trigram of clarity and intelligence. This represents the correct course of the superior man, strength being Qian, heaven, and clarity being Li, fire and light. This represents the correct course of the superior man. It is only the superior man who can comprehend and affect the minds of all under the sky. Leg. Union of forces describes a condition which is the opposite of the preceding hexagram of divorcement. What was there distress and obstruction is here a union of forces, but it must be based entirely on the good of the whole, without any taint of selfishness. The dynamic line, correctly in the fifth place, occupies the most important position and has for his correlate the magnetic second line, also in her correct place. The one female line is naturally sought after by all the male lines. The editors of the Konghasi edition would make the second line respond to all of the lines of the upper trigram as being more agreeable to the idea of union. The upper trigram is that of heaven, the lower is of fire, whose tendency is to mount upwards. This image suggests the fire ascending, blazing to the sky and uniting with it. All these ideas are in harmony with the notion of union, but it must be free of all factionalism. And this is indicated by its being in the remote districts of the country, where people are unsophisticated and free from the corrupting effects of urban intrigue. Although a union from such motives can cope with the greatest difficulties, yet a word of caution is added. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Connections are being made. If you are able to maintain your will, it is advisable to push for a synthesis. The superior man differentiates and prioritizes. He sorts and evaluates his options. This is another image of union. Not the supreme union of hexagram number 11, harmony, but a subordinate union of forces within the psyche which builds toward an eventual grand alliance. The component trigrams show the union of strength and clarity, suggesting that a certain level of mental comprehension is involved. To receive the hexagram without changing lines is often a confirmation of your particular thought, saying, in effect, you've made the connection. Comprehension, synthesis, involves making distinctions, analysis, a paradoxical process in which one must divide before one can reunite or unite. This is the solve et coagula of alchemy. Thus we see the superior man in the image creating categories to bring about union. This is discrimination directed toward reclassification or rectification. For example, a heterogeneous mixture of vegetable and flower seeds is made meaningful when one sorts them into their separate categories. The disparate elements then become coherently united. In I-Ching terms, each line obtains its proper correlate as in hexagram number 63. A quote from Plotinus in the Enneads, "A dialectic alternates between synthesis and analysis until it has gone through the entire domain of the intelligible and has arrived at the principle. Stopping there, for it is only there that it can stop, no longer busying itself with a multitude of objects since it has arrived at unity. It contemplates." The Chinese name of this hexagram includes the word Zhen, which is apparently a difficult concept, since many philosophers have spent a good deal of energy in trying to define it. Here's a quote from Wing Tsit Chan in A Source Book in Chinese Philosophy. "Zhen has been variously translated as benevolence, perfect virtue, goodness, human-heartedness, love, altruism, etc. None of these expresses all the meanings of the term. It means a particular virtue, benevolence, and also the general virtue, the basis of all goodness. Neo-Confucianists interpreted it as impartiality, the character of production and reproduction, consciousness, seeds that generate, the will to grow, one who forms one body with heaven and earth, or the character of love and the principle of mind. In modern times, it has even been equated with ether and electricity." Chu Hsi defines Zhen as the character of the mind, psyche, and the principle of love, union. Interpreted in this way, we are enabled to apprehend the essence of the word love, which is union, becoming one with its object. I've chosen the title of Union of Forces to emphasize intrapsychic dynamics which are not immediately obvious in Wilhelm's title of Fellowship with Men. For example, in dealing with questions pertaining to the work, the concept of ego states or subpersonalities is often relevant to the symbolism of this hexagram. A quote from J.G. Watkins in The Therapeutic Self. "The human self has been described here as composed of different ego states separated by boundaries. It has been likened to the structure of political principalities. From clinical observation, we find that ego states can cooperate for mutual well-being, like allied nations against a common enemy. An ego state may become split, like East and West Germany, or fracture into many segments, like the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Ego states may become cognitively dissonant and hostile to each other, like Syria and Israel. In fact, the behavior of ego states within an individual is not unlike that between individuals, and between those groups of individuals called countries. Why should the behavior of human stuff not be substantially similar at all levels of its organizations? The evidence of self-division into ego states is significant, and an equally tenable hypothesis might be that the states and boundaries of political entities have been imposed by men on each other because these represent an externalization of the internal divisions in their own selves." This hexagram's shadow side reveals circumstances preventing the union of entities or forces, more than those conditions promoting fruitful affiliation. Note that only the first and fifth lines of the figure depict a positive synthesis. The first one is minor, and in the case of line 5, union is attained only after much struggle. Lines 2 reveals a clique or faction situation opposed to the general welfare, and lines 3 and 4 are images of recalcitrant forces unable to either join or attack the alliance. The sixth line depicts a partial union, probably the most common outcome in general experience, which the Confucian commentary nevertheless minimizes. Out of 6 lines then, only 2 describe anything like complete fellowship. I have received this hexagram without changing lines when the context of the question revealed an incestuous clique-type situation, So not all fellowship or union of forces is necessarily an ideal configuration. And then we have revolution, 49. He calls metamorphosis. Other titles might be revolution or revolutions, transformation, skinning, the bridle, the symbol of change, molting, leather, skin, molt, cut off, changing, radical change, overthrowing. This supporting hexagram puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship with it all. Judgment, leg. Metamorphosis is believed in only after it has been accomplished. Firm correctness abolishes regret and brings successful progress. Wilhelm/Baines, revolution. On your own day you are believed. Supreme success. Furthering through perseverance, remorse disappears. Blofeld, revolution. Not before the day of its completion will men have faith in it. Sublime success. Determination in a righteous course brings reward. Regret vanishes. Very often this means renovation, as of character, etc., but it may also mean exactly what it says. Confucius, though he regarded loyalty to the ruler as one of the highest virtues, recognized that evil men forfeit their right to rule by their excesses, and it is probable that this notion antedates him by many centuries. Lu, revolution. When the appropriate day comes, the people will believe in it. Great success. It is beneficial to continue. Remorse vanishes. Ritsema/Karcher, skinning. Before zenith sun, thereupon conforming. Spring growing, harvesting trial. Repenting, extinguished. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of stripping away a protective cover. It emphasizes that radically changing and renewing the way you present yourself is the adequate way to handle it. Cleary 1. In revolution, the sun of the self is truth. This is creative, developmental, fruitful, and perfect. Regret vanishes. In old texts, when it says that the alchemical elixir is in people, but first they have to refine the self and wait for the proper time, this means to make a radical purge of all the pollution of past influences and not let any flaws remain in the heart. Wu, reform indicates that revolution will become credible when the time is ripe. In this way, it is great and pervasive and advantageous to be persevering. Regret will disappear. The image. Leg, a fire in the marsh, the image of metamorphosis. The superior man synchronizes his astronomical calculations to clarify the times and seasons. Wilhelm/Baines, fire in the lake, the image of revolution. Thus the superior man sets the calendar in order and makes the seasons clear. Blofeld, this hexagram symbolizes fire rising from a marshy lake. The superior man regulates the calendar and thus ensures that men are clear about times and seasons. Wu, there is fire below the marsh, this is reform. Thus the Junsi, or chief son or superior person, inspired to develop a calendrical system for keeping time. Is inspired to. Commentary, Confucius/Leg. In metamorphosis, water and fire extinguish each other. When two daughters with opposing viewpoints live together, change is inevitable. But after the change is accomplished, faith is accorded to. Clarity brings good cheer and progress through what is correct. When a transformation is properly accomplished, all occasion for regret disappears. Heaven and earth undergo their changes, and the four seasons complete their functions. The rulers of old transformed the state in accordance with the will of heaven and in response to the wishes of men. Great indeed is what takes place in a time of change. Leg. The written character translated as metamorphosis is used here in the sense of changing. Originally used for the skin of an animal or bird, it received the significance of changing at a very early time. The figure deals with the subject of changes which are called for in the state of the country. The necessity for change is recognized, and hints are given as to the spirit and manner in which they should be brought about. The judgment assumes that change is viewed by people generally with suspicion and dislike, and therefore should not be made hastily. This can refer to inner complexes, habits, etc. When the necessity for change has been proven beforehand and subsequently carried out with firm correctness, then the issue will turn out satisfactorily. The lower trigram is the symbol for fire and the upper for water. Water extinguishes fire and fire dries up water. Each changes the other. The lower trigram is also the second daughter and the upper is the youngest daughter. In the scheme of the trigrams, these two are seen to be mutually incompatible. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Hidden within its cocoon, the caterpillar becomes a butterfly. Who would believe it until the metamorphosis was complete? The superior man recognizes that celestial sequences create changes only when they are due. He therefore acts in accordance with the requirements of the time. The 49th hexagram makes an analogy between the natural metamorphosis of animal pelts and the proper way to regard radical changes in government. Lines 1, 5, and 6 all refer to skin, and 2, 3, and 4 refer to politics. The general idea is that radical transformations occur at their own natural pace. They cannot be successfully forced any more than eggs can be made to hatch before their time. The image makes this point in its reference to the celestial correlation of the seasons. Quote from Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 2. There's a time for everything, a time for every occupation under heaven, a time for giving birth, a time for dying, a time for planting, a time for uprooting what has been planted, etc. Once one assumes conscious responsibility for the work, there comes along an indefinite period in which one labors unceasingly without any visible results at all. Dream images and I-Ching meditations will indicate that progress is being made, but the ego's life in space-time consists of seemingly fruitless labor in the service of a transcendental ideal. This is a universal experience. It happens to everyone who undertakes the work. In the Western mystery tradition, it is known as the dark night of the soul. See hexagram number 36 for further insights into this unavoidable phenomenon. A quote from R. Wang in the Kabbalistic Tarot. The personality undergoes a willful death, surrendering everything that it believes itself to be. Most difficult is that this total surrender of life, this initiatory sacrifice, must precede the experience of cosmic awareness. One is required to give up the totality of one's being, one's very life, in relative darkness, yet in the faith that there will be a resurrection into the light. Psychologically interpreted, metamorphosis means that changes are taking place in the unconscious psyche, but don't expect them to manifest until their growth is complete. The ego must recognize this and persevere with the work, even when common sense counsels otherwise. It is a period of probation and trial, and many there are who fail the test. A quote from ZBS Halevi in Kabbalah and Exodus. There is no shortcut without impeding growth or setting the flow pattern of the soul back. Until each physical or psychological function has been correctly connected or developed, many aspirants do not perceive this law and become impatient and even lose faith when providence seems to be holding back. Nothing occurs outside its time, as it is part of a sequence in the great cosmic cycle that unfolds the grand design of existence. If there is any consolation in this terrible ordeal, it is that others have made the journey before you and survived. Keep the faith that in the imagery of this hexagram, the lower trigram of clear perception following the upper trigram of cheerfulness will lead you through the most challenging of all transformations. A quote from E.C. Whitmont in The Symbolic Quest. Where the issue of ultimate meaning is constellated, transformation will eventually occur. even though only by way of a great deal of suffering. We will get now back to 13, our primary hexagram, union of forces, or sameness with people. And we will read our changing line 6, which is the most focused part of our reading. It takes precedence over all other elements. It sticks a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. Changing line 6 has the general context of beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. Changing line 6 in hexagram 13, sameness with people or union of forces. Leg, the 6th line dynamic shows the representative of the union of forces in the suburbs. There will be no occasion for repentance. Wilhelm/Baines, fellowship with men in the meadow, no remorse. Blofeld, her beloved is in a distant frontier region, no regret. In Chinese history, it often happened that a man was drafted and sent far away to a frontier region from which he could not be expected to return for many years. In this case, his beloved, betrothed, or wife has enough wisdom to give up repining, since the case is a hopeless one. The implication is that we should not repine. Lu, fellowship of men in the open countryside, no remorse. Ritzema/Karcher, concording people tending towards the suburbs without repenting. Wu, men of fellowship gather outside of the city. There will be no regret. Commentary, Confucius/Leg, his object has not yet been attained. Wilhelm/Baines, the will is not yet satisfied. Blofeld, this is not what is desired. Ritzema/Karcher, purpose not yet acquired indeed. Cleary too, the aspiration has not yet been attained. Wu, their aspirations have not prevailed. Leg, the union reaches to all within the suburbs, but it is not yet universal. The ideal of the hexagram is found in the judgment in which the union of forces occurs in an open country. In the open country. In line 6, the union is only in the suburbs which surround the city, yet are not quite out in the open country. This indicates only a partial success, but there is still no cause for repentance. Notes and paraphrases. Su, the man achieves fellowship, but only with those nearby. Simply because mankind has not yet attained universal brotherhood, however, is no ground for remorse. Wing, the unity and fellowship that are possible in this position are not significant in terms of universal needs. However, joining with others, even in a small way, is not a mistake. Editor, the union of forces is adequate to meet the current situation, but it seems to be a compromise at best. Though the circumstances are said to evoke no remorse, the Confucian commentary leaves no doubt about his assessment of this position. The work still has a long way to go to be complete, but since that seldom happens this side of hyperspace, any increment of integration has to be better than no progress at all. Blofeld's translation and note seem too specific to facilitate these wider meanings. A quote from E.C. Whitmont in The Symbolic Quest. Thus, human ego development is basically conditioned by and continues to unfold between the divisive yang pole of separateness and the connecting yin pole of union. Between these polarities of separation and encounter, loss of oneness and the reestablishment of oneness through meeting, the sense of identity continues to grow throughout the life of the individual. James Dekorne breaks line 6 down into 3 possible succinct definitions, A, B, and C. A minor synthesis. B, psychic integration is adequate for the present, but further work is required. C, half a loaf is better than none. Now we will get to Hilary Barrett's I-Ching commentary, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future. And we will read our primary hexagram 13. People in harmony. Key questions. What are the unique contributions? Where is the common ground? How will your life change if your group expands? Oracle. People in harmony in the wilds, creating success, fruitful to cross the great river, a noble one's constancy bears fruit. People create harmony with one another where they are, of like mind, and find common cause. They come out from the walls of their villages to forge alliances in the wild country. That is, they seek out common ground where they can meet beyond the familiar boundaries that usually define the limits of people like us. This means radically expanding the whole idea of who we are. Such fellowship is usually created between people, but it can also take place within an individual. For instance, between inner selves or between apparently unrelated traditions and ways of knowing. There is harmony when these are brought together in inner conversation to create strong alliances. There is strength and energy in alliance. People in harmony can commit themselves further, take greater risks, they can cross the river and enter new territories. Once there is agreement, it's worthwhile to follow the vision tenaciously with the constancy of a noble one. Image. Heaven joins with fire, people in harmony. A noble one sorts the clans and differentiates between things. Imagine the fire reaching up towards the night sky, joining with the stars to cast light on the many clans gathered around it. A noble one has the clarity of vision to see the shared nature all the groups have in common, and also what is shared only within each individual group. And how this distinctiveness comes from their clannish roots. Harmony between people will not come about by forcibly amalgamating the clans. To disarm their natural defensiveness, the noble one needs first to recognize and respect identities different from his own. Sequence. People in harmony follows from hexagram 12, blocked. Things cannot end with blockage, and so people in harmony follows. The exclusive, divisive mindset of us versus them must be replaced by a larger sense of fellowship. Human awareness lights up the world, perceiving and creating the possibilities for co-creation and overcoming the drift apart of hexagram 12. Pair. People in harmony forms a pair with hexagram 14, great possession. Great possession means crowds. People in harmony means connecting. There is power in groups and alliances, but the emphasis for now is on the human experience of harmony and connection rather than on what might emerge. And we will go to our supporting hexagram 49, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context, influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. And she calls hexagram 49 radical change. Key questions. How can you break the mold? How must the form change to express the essence? Oracle. Radical change. On your own day, there is truth and confidence. From the source, creating success, constancy bears fruit, regrets vanish. It is time for transformation. The old Chinese character for radical change, which also means leather, shows an animal hide. This is change like a shaman's, putting on a new skin to change your identity. And it is also revolutionary change. This hexagram marks the day when the Zhao people and their allies marched out to meet the armies of the corrupt Shang dynasty and defeated them. You change the governing principle and bring about renewal. In the moment of change, there is truth, sincerity, and a sure knowledge. Then the power of the whole unfolding creative process, from the source through to fruition and fulfillment, can enter here and change the world. Naturally, regrets vanish, along with the past to which they belong, and along with the past to which they belong. The new time is coming. Image. In the center of the lake there is fire, radical change. A noble one calculates the heavenly signs and clarifies the seasons. The new king must realign the calendar with the stars, bringing his people's daily activities back into harmony with the time. The light of awareness is at the center of things, clear and unambiguous as starlight, and the calendar gives it expression. Inner lucidity illuminates and transforms a way of life, not bringing change for its own sake, but restoring a natural harmony. Sequence. Radical change follows from Hexagram 48, the well. The way of the well does not allow things not to change radically. Over time, human regimes fall out of harmony with the way, Tao. Reconnecting with the unchanging source requires you to change the way you live. Pair. Radical change forms a pair with Hexagram 50, the vessel. Radical change puts away the old, the vessel grasps renewal. Before you can found the new, you must remove the old. You may need to make deeper changes than you imagined. And now back to our primary hexagram 13 to read our changing line 6, which is the most focused part of our reading. Takes precedence over all other elements. It puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. Changing line 6 has the general context of beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. Changing line 6 in our primary hexagram 13, people in harmony. People in harmony at the outskirts altar, no regrets. Outside the walls, there is an altar mound where many people can gather to make offerings. This is a wide open space with enough room for everyone to be as they are without friction. And in the broadest, simplest sense possible, there is a shared interest that sets past conflicts in perspective. This doesn't mean that you can be in perfect agreement with everyone, but there is sufficient agreement that change can be accomplished. There will be no regrets for a phantom perfection. The past is left where it belongs, and a new phase begins. We'll now read a randomly card-drawn chapter from the Tao Te Ching. '63. Can read all these. There's only 4. 1, 3, and 72. In the Tao Te Ching, translated by Jia Fu Fang and Jane English. Chapter 63, wow, of the Tao Te Ching. Need another one of these. This was a gift, though. I still use it. My good friend Austin. 63. Practice non-action. Work without doing. Taste the tasteless. Magnify the small. Increase the few. Reward bitterness with care. See simplicity in the complicated. Achieve greatness in little things. In the universe, the difficult things are done as if they are easy. In the universe, great acts are made up of small deeds. The sage does not attempt anything very big and thus achieves greatness. Easy promises make for little trust. Taking things lightly results in great difficulty. Because the sage always confronts difficulties, he never experiences them. Chapter 1 of the Tao Te Ching. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of 10,000 things. Ever desireless, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one can see the manifestations. These two spring from the same source but differ in name. This appears as darkness. Darkness within darkness. The gate to all mystery. Three. Not exalting the gifted prevents quarreling. Not collecting treasures prevents stealing. Not seeing desirable things prevents confusion of the heart. The wise therefore rule by emptying hearts and stuffing bellies, by weakening ambitions and strengthening bones. If people lack knowledge and desire, then intellectuals will not try to interfere. If nothing is done, then all will be well. And apparently we had one hiding under 3, which is 2. Obviously these were shuffled so well. Under heaven, all can see beauty as beauty only because there is ugliness. All can know good as good only because there is evil. Therefore, having and not having arise together. Difficult and easy complement each other. Long and short contrast each other. High and low rest upon each other. Voice and sound harmonize each other. Front and back follow one another. Therefore the sage goes about doing nothing, teaching no talking. The 10,000 things rise and fall without cease, creating yet not possessing, working yet not taking credit. Work is done, then forgotten. Therefore it lasts forever. And the one I just knocked on the ground. 72. When men lack a sense of awe, there will be disaster. Do not intrude in their homes. Do not harass them at work. If you do not interfere, they will not weary of you. Therefore the sage knows himself but makes no show, has self-respect but is not arrogant. He lets go of that and chooses this.